especially in a new space like web3 and NFT, your greatest product may not have been created yet, right? Your most important insight most likely has not come yet, and therefore you have to be open to that next level of insight. A lot of that will actually come from your power users. As a creator of a product, you may actually use your product less than your users. Most likely that's the case. And so finding ways to get to the real answer, I think, is extremely important.
Welcome to the Human Insight Podcast, where we share with you the business stories, ideas, and trends shaping the future of customer experience, told firsthand by the experts themselves in thought-provoking conversations.
Hi everyone, I'm Janelle Estes, Chief Insights Officer at User Testing, and today we're very excited to have Ethan Song, co-founder and CEO of RareCircles, on the show. Ethan was previously the co-founder and CEO of Frank & Oak, a leading direct-to-consumer brand, and he's an active investor in web3. As the RareCircles CEO, Ethan empowers a new generation of entrepreneurs and brands to build deeper relationships with their communities through NFTs and blockchain technology. The intuitive platform allows anyone to make, sell, and manage powerful NFT memberships under one operating system. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ethan, and welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Ethan, if you were to get a brand's or company's logo tattooed on your body, what brand would it be? And don't answer that question yet. I recently saw a LinkedIn conversation on this topic, and I thought I would ask our user testing contributors that question. So here's what they said.
If I had to get a tattoo of a brand or a company, what would I get? Well, what came to mind is the Lululemon logo. And why would be, I really appreciate and stand with everything that brand stands for, and how they really promote health and wellness and comfort and a bit of luxury where appropriate. And I also like that logo.
I think the most likely would be like a Disney tattoo. I really love everything Disney. I don't have one yet, but I would definitely get a Disney tattoo. Maybe not even the brand, but like the logo. If that wasn't it, I would probably get, I'm trying to think of something. Oh, maybe like a Chick-fil-A tattoo because it's like my favorite. Maybe that, but I'm not sure that I support the company all the way, so I'm not sure. But it probably would be like something like some fast food that I eat a lot tattoo or a Disney tattoo. Either one of those.
Skateboard brand. I could get like a skateboard brand that I love, like Lucky, Girl. I love that logo, honestly. That would be sick. I think it would be good, like art.
Maybe like the Fenty logo. I love makeup. I love Fenty. I love Rihanna. Or I would get the Disney logo because I've always loved Disney ever since I was a child. I've loved everything Disney movies, Disney cartoons, princesses, all of that.
I love Pilates, so maybe I'd get like a Pilates, logo from a specific Pilates brand.
Okay, Ethan, what would your answer be? What tattoo would you get?
It's a great question because I don't have any tattoos, so it'd be a pretty big commitment for me to get my first tattoo as a brand tattoo. But I'd have to go with a brand called Norda. It's an up and coming running brand from Canada that I do have to say that I was part of its founding, so there's a bit of a plug there. But why I would associate myself with the brand, I think one, it's the outdoors, which is something I love. The second, it kind of represents the spirit of Canada, which is just open air, freedom, and being out there and having a good time. And obviously we're coming out of a COVID period, so I feel like everyone wants to be outside, and so that's why I would have that tattoo. It's interesting though that you asked that question because I think a lot of people do get brand tattoos, and if you're a marketer, obviously you're successful if someone wants to get a tattoo of that brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find it fascinating, and maybe it's not as surprising for, let's say, like B2C companies, like the video that we just watched or kind of listened to, people talking about Disney or Fendi or some of these more B2C type experiences. I think the ones that really shock me, for lack of a better word, are the B2B, like enterprise software. Like I mentioned to you, I recently saw somebody post on Twitter a tattoo of a Figma logo, and that was really what kind of drove this question and why I was curious and hearing from our contributors on that. Did anything surprise you when you were listening to their responses? Anything stand out to you, or was it pretty predictable, I guess, would you say?
I mean, obviously, it seems like Disney is still scoring high, and like that's a good example of a brand that's stayed very relevant. But no, I would say I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised on the B2B side, because I think we think of a brand often as like a poster with a logo, which is like the almost traditional way of thinking about it. But it's really your relationship with something, with a product, and it could be any product, right? And I don't think that a brand is any different to a certain extent to music, or a product is not any different and to a movie, something that you would associate more with potential tattoos. And so I think culture and values are embedded into products to a certain extent. And you're using Figma as an example. I think a lot of people would argue that there's a lot of love for that product and its functionalities, and so I think for someone who's deep into using it, it's not any different than being an early fan of Radiohead. So I think there's similarities there in a relationship that you can create.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points. Well, thanks for indulging in that conversation and sharing your example. I know you didn't come on to the Human Insight podcast to talk about tattoos, but it's good to hear your perspective, and love to jump into the meat of the discussion here. So, Ethan, can you tell us a little bit about and a little bit more about yourself, the company that you founded, RareCircles, and I guess what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, and so I mean, I've been in the technology and startup space for over 12 years now. Originally I was from China, but I've kind of grown in Canada. I come from more of an engineering background, but I've always been very interested in brand building, and so having started a few companies, I would say one of the ones you named was actually a D2C fashion brand called Frank and Oak, and at that time we had really innovated in a way that we delivered the product, which was through customization and delivering a unique experience for every single user. And so I've been passionate about consumer experiences, for basically most of my life. And in terms of what RareCircle is building, we think of it as providing the tools for this sort of new generation of entrepreneurs and creators to build Web3 experiences. We think that we're still very early in the ecosystem, and that we don't want only technical people to be able to engage with the blockchain and these new technologies. We think that Web3 is really about creativity and community, and therefore should be democratic and open to anyone that want to participate, and not have technical limitation be something that stops you from doing it. And so that's the general mission and purpose of the company.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a topic that feels slightly inaccessible for maybe the common person, in the sense of like, what is this new world and how do I show up in it? And is it relevant for me? I think the buzzword of 2022 is Metaverse, right? And I think there's some parallel around that in terms of like this new idea, this new way of engaging with community, of having different experiences, but how does that actually apply to me and who I am, and how can this be valuable to me and part of my life? So you were the founder of Frank and Oak, which is direct-to-consumer retail brand, and then you've sort of pivoted to RareCircles, which is, I guess, from the outsider perspective, quite different from D2C retail. It's more around Web3, community, NFT. So can you help me understand sort of that journey and the transition?
Yeah, it does feel different. It is different. There's no doubt about that. That said, I would say a big part of Frank and Oak's success was in the innovation that we've made, not necessarily on the clothing that you bought, but rather on the way that you consume the product, and so the user journey and experience. And so I've always been in the business of creating new experiences. But specifically to Rare Circles, because I sort of, in my early 20s, I was part of this sort of like D2C, like e-commerce revolution. I sort of saw how, whether it's Shopify or MailChimp or some of the other tools, made it both very accessible in terms of knowledge and in terms of price to start your own business and to start your own brand effectively, right? And I saw how over like a 10-year period, that basically started to displace even major brands and larger players. And so I've been basically having observed that, from a brand perspective. Once I departed Frank and Oak, I was looking to effectively start building tools. And actually, the way that I got to Web3 was through two ways. One, I was looking at commerce enablement tools. So like, hey, what's the next evolution in commerce? And second, as you mentioned, I've been a pretty active angel investor for a long time. So I've already been investing in crypto and Web3 projects even before leaving Frank and Oak. So those two kind of connected, where I was like, hey, what is commerce in the end? Physical products are one way of doing commerce, but digital goods can also be commerce. And so that's how the dots basically connected. And that's how I got into this space. But I would say overall, I'm a big supporter of entrepreneurship and providing the ability for individuals to create new businesses. And obviously Web3 is, a great place for that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's really interesting to think about how those two worlds fit so interestingly together and how what you're doing is very future forward. It's fascinating I didn't even recognize the parallel there. So it's really, really interesting to sort of hear that perspective. We recently presented at the Wall Street Journal's Future of Everything conference. And as you can imagine, Web3, NFT, crypto was part of the conversation. But, as a company that helps our customers better understand their end users and, what people actually need or expect from them, we actually set up a booth at the conference, and we were able to capture some information around how consumers and people, humans, think about NFTs, what's important to them, how they may or may not be valuable to them. So I want to play a video clip for you. It's just a handful of people talking about their view of NFTs, and I'd love to get your perspective after we watch it together.
Sounds good.
You have to not try and rush mint. For me, if you're not doxed, if the owners are not known, I have nothing to do with you. I do know BAYC is not doxed, neither is Azuki, but those are rare circumstances. Majority of projects that aren't doxed usually are a bit shady. In case you're not aware, doxed means that the founders are not known. But for me to invest, I like to have a good roadmap. The art has to be brilliant. I don't want to see some quick Photoshop kind of job. Because at the end of the day, if I'm holding it, I want it to be my PFP. I want it to be my display picture or something, maybe. So yeah, and then obviously the opposites of that will then be what's unappealing to me.
A project is all about the community and the people around it. So if you know a lot about the developers, the coders around the NFT project, and actually it's something as little as showing their face, looking at their LinkedIn, looking what they've done for, what other projects they've done for too as well, and now they're starting their own, that can go a long way because it builds trust with the community.
First of all, I need to be sure that the projects have that kind of original design. Also, that the roadmap is something that has utility for the people.
Obviously, I'm gonna put out on a Bored Ape, obviously, because those are going for the craziest amount of money right now.
The one thing I really don't like is I feel like the biggest say community place, you want to know if the entity is going to do well, check the Discord. Because if the project's not even out yet and people are hyped about it, the Discord's always keeps on going. You know that this project is going to hit because people are like, I'm ready, I've got my NFT, I'm ready, I got my NFT, I'm ready, I got my NFT.
I have to say, as someone who doesn't know this world that well, some of the references in there, I think, are a little over my head. So can you break down generally what we just heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think before I go there, I think it's important to understand that, NFTs or non-fungible tokens are a technology. They're not a thing that you buy, actually. Just like they are a thing that you buy, but it's like when you buy software, you don't just buy software, you buy Excel or Figma, you buy a product, right? So, and I think that's something that people get confused about. They see NFT as a thing, whereas it's a technology. And obviously, there are also a lot of haters out there, that are against NFTs. And I always find it's interesting because being against NFTs is like being against paper. You can't really be against it. It depends what's written on it. And so to that point, I would say I think there are two very large use cases for NFT. NFT is really about digital ownership, meaning that, your ownership of that, whatever that is authenticated on the blockchain. I think those are the simplest way to describe it. I think the two most common use cases are at the moment digital goods, and you're talking about the Metaverse, which is like I own this specific digital good and no one else owns this digital good. And the second piece I would say that is important would be the idea basically of community ownership, meaning I own a piece of this community. And so the comments that you guys had were actually very, very specific. And that's why you were saying, for someone that comes from the outside, this language is seems crazy to me. And most of them were related to what would be called a PFP project, but just an NFT project in general, which is really the idea of buying into the ownership of a community. And so I think communities, from my perspective, at the moment are probably the strongest use case, which is if you think about, social media in general, a lot of people feel that, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, you don't own your data, right? They own your followers. They change your algorithms. They don't really respect you, and you've put in work to build this community. You're earning a living from this community. And so the idea of decentralizing communities through the usage of NFTs is a very powerful, I think, use case. And that those people that commented, I think, related to that. Now, most people are going to be buyers and not creators. And so most of the comments you've heard are more from a buyer's perspective versus a creator's perspective.
Yeah, I think in particular, the question that was framed there was, what makes a good NFT or one that you would want to purchase? And so based on your sort of description there, thanks for sharing that perspective. It's helpful. And based on that and then recalling just what we heard, I think that makes sense in terms of what people are looking for. And you're right, they did mention sort of ownership of something unique and different, but then also ownership within a community as being two important threads there that I think you pulled on.
Yeah, and I think it's also a question when you want to buy an NFT, which is, why am I buying this NFT, right? Is it because I expect it to appreciate in value, which I would say in 2021 was one of the majority of why people got involved in the space? Is it because I want to support this artist, right, or this entrepreneur? Is it because I want to have actually a word to say in this project, like governance? So I think when people refer to the roadmap, they're really referring to what is the intent of the project and how do I get involved as a member of this community. I think it's really interesting. And I think it's also very interesting to talk about at this point in time. Obviously, we are a little bit in a crypto winter, but also the broader kind of stock market is also down. And so I think, people are not, the NFTs prices are not increasing at the same rate as they were last year. And I think it makes people, think about what is the value in the NFT in a different way when prices aren't increasing. I actually think it's a very healthy discussion to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. So you shared a couple kind of key themes on NFTs. Anything else that we in the public should know about NFTs?
I mean, I think Well, I mean, there's many things from a pure technology perspective that I think would be great for people to get educated on. As an example, what's Ethereum and what are the different like layer ones and layer twos that are powering NFTs. But ultimately, what I'd expect to see in the next year is that there are certain things that are going to be powered via NFTs, and you're not even going to realize that you just bought an NFT. So it's very possible that your first NFT may be buying a ticket for a concert that also offers you VIP benefits, or maybe it's taking a picture on Instagram that Instagram turns into an NFTs. And so I think we're going to see all these new use cases where the specific kind of thought process of, okay, fine, I'm going to buy my first NFT may actually come much smoother and faster than you would expect. And I do think that's going to happen in the next like 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think about that with some of the newer technologies too. Like everybody keeps talking, as I mentioned before, about the metaverse. It's like, it's not just like, it's not this thing that you just discreetly enter one day, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're probably actually dabbling in it a little bit already. Like my kids play Roblox. Isn't that the metaverse? Like, and by default, have I also been exposed to the metaverse? The answer is yes. And I feel like NFT is sort of a similar space where it's like, again, you're not discreetly entering this universe. It just sort of starts to be part of what we are all doing. And maybe it's not super obvious to the end user. With your roles in product design and the customer shopping experience, can you talk a little bit about how you personally connect and hear from your customers? I mean, I think you likely had, consumers in the D2C space that you were connecting with, and likely doing the same with RareCircles. So how do you go about doing that? And how do you think about that in terms of priorities when you're running a company and balancing lots of different things? How does the customer perspective and customer feedback fit into a world where there's a lot of things competing for your time and attention?
Yeah, I do think like D2C and B2B is quite different because I would say, like in both instances, I think qualitative and quantitative feedback on like, from customers are both extremely important. I find in the D2C space, quantitative is more important because, they're small numbers, but you have a lot of people interacting with your product. So I find that that's even more important. Whereas for B2B, I feel like qualitative feedback from users is very important. And you learn a lot, obviously, about your product. But I would say beyond just learning about, hey, am I getting good conversion and things like that are basics. I think two things that are really interesting is thinking about segmentation. And so thinking about like who is the product for and what are the different instances of the product for. And I always say that you never truly find product to market fit, meaning that it's a continuous battle, and it's a continuous battle because the product market fit happens at a different level for different segmentation of your user base. So that's one piece that I always recommend is really think about segmentation and understanding that you may have a few different customers and how do you service them properly and get feedback properly that's actionable. But the second piece is also insight. I do think that, especially in a new space like Web3 and NFT, your greatest product may not have been created yet, right? Your most important insight most likely has not come yet, and therefore you have to be open to that next level of insight, and a lot of that will actually come from your power users, because as a creator of a product, you may actually use your product less than your users. Most likely that's the case. And so understanding that they may have more insight and finding a way to get to that answer also, right? Like just asking questions doesn't always deliver the value that you think will deliver. And so finding ways to get to the real answer, I think, is extremely important.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point, and probably a stark difference, not stark, but a difference between the company you were running before and the company that you're running now in terms of D2C and e-commerce. There were patterns that have been set up over many, many years that people just expect, right? And there's just ways that you interact with a company online and purchase from them, and those types of activities that we all do likely every day. But when you have something new, to your point, like NFT and Web3, like this is a whole new world that's been sort of uncharted, and there's no pattern library to go look up, right? And so I love that point of, your most valuable insight likely hasn't been uncovered yet, and why it's, so important to just be continually curious, right? Of what's useful, what's not, what people want. what needs are unmet and how you can deliver against that. You responded to a tweet about Starbucks adding NFTs to their loyalty program recently, and you said, I expect many major companies integrating NFTs as part of their rewards and loyalty programs. It creates a whole new level of engagement by allowing fans to actually own their rewards. Can you talk a little bit about that and your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the like rewards and point system, historically, were always sort of closed, ecosystems. Meaning, like if you get points from Starbucks, they're in they're a Starbucks app, right, and you can redeem it at Starbucks. And so it's very much a, let's call it merchant to customer, one-to-one relationship. By enabling, and I actually have no idea how their program is going to be designed, but my thought about making those points NFTs or making them into tokens means that now they're tradable, they can be exchanged, and so you can see basically Starbucks fan want to trade different Starbucks NFTs that have either benefits or are just collectibles altogether, and so now enables your fan, your customers to engage with each other and not just with you as like a merchant. But beyond that, even you can even push it further. You could effectively trade those points or sell those points for other royalty programs or for other points and get other benefits. And so I think that's what's really interesting, is that then it makes it that it can be transported and into other ecosystems and not being kind of stuck in a sort of walled gardens. I think that's super powerful. And as an example, and now Starbucks may not want that, but like as an example, if I started, I don't know, a new matcha concept, I could actually say, hey, like you could redeem your Starbucks dollars here, up to like 25% of your purchase, and I could actually, really take the Starbucks dollars, right? So it's not just like, hey, come because you're a Starbucks fan. You could actually send me your Starbucks, points, and then use that to pay for your goods, even though I'm not Starbucks. And so you can see how this opens up a world of possibilities. But I think for the fans, it just creates a whole other level of engagement because the value of those points all of a sudden really increases.
Yeah, I love that idea of opening things up a little bit and having it be more than just the one-to-one relationship. It feels like you could see some parallels there for other experiences too. And I think this is a good example of, you had mentioned about how NFTs will begin to be integrated into, everyday real life experiences. Do you have an example or sort of like a, when you think of the future of NFTs, like what is the world one day? Like, do you have like in it, like I love the Starbucks example, so I'm just trying to like imagine like what else, what is the future here? What do you see?
Well, I think you're starting to see signs of it. I think one of the area that I've seen a lot of progress in the last year is really around like festivals and physical experiences. And so, leveraging NFTs almost as an access pass for additional benefits, VIP access to artists, access to unique communities and fan clubs. And so I think that to a certain extent, like NFTs are a really good fit for experience-based businesses. And so you're seeing that integrate. I think you're kind of seeing two things happen. One, which is those NFT projects, that we heard, some of those fans talk about earlier on, are all looking for a business model. So they start as NFT projects and they're all going to evolve into a business that serves and provides value to their users. On the other hand, you can also see real businesses integrate what makes NFT projects so great within a pre-existing business. And I think we're going to see innovations in both ways of interacting with NFTs. But you were talking about how like NFTs is so new, we have no idea what people are going to do. I think ultimately we're still dealing with humans, and what people want to have, like the values or the emotions that they want to feel. Let's say I want to feel more connected to my favorite artist. I want to gain access to things that other people don't gain access to. I want to show off what I bought because, I'm the only one who has it. Those behaviors are still here, right? And so I think that a lot of the NFT projects are building around the same behaviors that were always there, but it's finding a new way on it. It's amplifying it, making it more exciting and powerful potentially, but the behaviors are there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. We're all sort of driving towards delivering a particular experience and making that really authentic connection and a meaningful connection with who we're serving. And it actually kind of comes full circle, right? Imagine NFT related experiences powering brand loyalty, which then in turn results in people getting tattoos of brands. I know it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, it could be another sort of level of brand loyalty and connection that just doesn't quite exist yet. That really does power, your sort of group of super fans, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know that some people are already tattooing NFTs. I've seen some Bored Apes and some punks out there, so I know it's already happening.
So good. All right, we're going to move over into lightning questions. So we ask these questions of every guest on the podcast. So is there a book that you've read recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I've reread The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham. I know it's a pretty big endeavor talking about it, but it's basically the only book you need to read about investing. And I think it applies to technology investing. And I think it applies to venture, angel investing as well. So it's a great read, and it also speaks to having mental models to making better decisions. I've always been one to make more kind of, I don't know if it's emotions, but instinct-driven decisions. And I found that having more kind of decision models really helps you to organize your ideas. And so I found that book helps as it relates to investing. But it may be tough that you're looking for a book for summer reads at the beach.
No, I mean, everybody loves a good, solid business book. I think that's a great recommendation. I think it's super important right now, as you mentioned, sort of the current market and volatility and what's important to investors is ever more important, or is more important than ever. What about a piece of advice that you would give to someone trying to convince somebody else, others, to invest in customer feedback? I think the world where we're in a place where many people believe and know this is important, but maybe not everyone has come along with that idea yet, especially maybe their bosses or leaders. So any thoughts or tips for people trying to convince others to invest in listening to their customers?
I mean, I think a lot of people, especially in the startup world and even in the tech world, because a lot of people were big fans of Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs said that your customers doesn't know what you want, or they don't know what they want. First of all, I tell people, well, most likely you're not Steve Jobs, so that's the first thing. But beyond that, I would say, I think Steve Jobs was very acute to listening, because your customer's not going to invent the product for they're not doing it for themselves. But they will provide feedback on needs. They will provide feedback on gaps and things like that. And so I think it's extremely important. Once again, going back to how I answered this question early on, which is your biggest insight may come from your customer. But beyond that, I would say also creating a certain loop to get customer feedback also drives engagement, right? Just the fact that they can provide feedback and be part of your process actually helps you to build community as well. So that's a side benefit of getting customer feedback, is building a stronger community around your product, and having you the ability to market against that. I think something people don't talk often about.
Yeah, that's a great point. People love to be heard, and knowing that they're being heard and listened to is a great driver of engagement. And yeah, I think there's different types of customer listening. There's listening for what people need, what is sort of unmet needs, is kind of one type of listening. And then of course there's feedback on the existing experience or what they might want, and sort of that whole co-design sort of motion. But I think your original point around, Steve Jobs, yeah, he had that quote, but in fact he was actually listening to customers. He just wasn't taking their word.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, exactly.
their word literally, right? Yeah. Exactly. All right. So when you think about the future of web3 and NFTs, what are you most excited about?
I mean, I'm very excited that we're so early in the space. It's kind of like we're in the 90s as it relates to the internet. Obviously, in the 90s, I was much too young to partake in the early stage of building, the internet. So I think for me, it's just being involved that early in a space that still has everything to build. But beyond that, I think from what the technology can do if successful, and we don't know yet, right, if it's going to be successful. So I want to make sure that's clear, is really two things. One, ownership, and second, providing a new avenue for entrepreneurs and creators to build and build a life for themselves. And so I think that's extremely powerful if it comes to play.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on the Human Insight podcast, Ethan. I really loved learning a little from you around, and a lot from you actually, around NFTs and web3 and what you're doing at RareCircle and your evolution throughout this whole digital world. So thanks for joining us, and it was great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you liked it, please share it with a friend or coworker. If you think it could have been better, let us know. Email us at podcast@usertesting.com. Thanks.